That's a 2-0 run. That's a 3-0 run. That's a 4-0 run. That's a 5-0 run. That's a 6-0 run. That's a 7-0 run. That's an 8-0 run. That's a 9-0 run. That's a 10-zip run. That's a 10-zip run. That is an 11-zip run. That's a 12-0 run. That's a 10-0 run. That's a 12-zip run. That's a 13-zip run. That's a 13-0 run. That's a 14-0 run. That's a 14-zip run. That's a 15-zip run. That's a 15-zip run. That's a 15-0 run. That's a 15-0 run. That's a 14-0 run. That's a 16-0 run. That's a 16-zip run. That's a 17-0 run. That's a 17-zip run. That's an 18-0 run. That's an 18-zip run. That's a 19-zip run. That's a 19-zip run. That's a 19-0 run. That's a 19-0 run. That's a 20-zip run. That's a 20-zip run. That's a 20-0 run. That's a 5-point game. That's a 1-point game. That's a 2-point game. That's a 1-point game. That's a 2-point game. That's a 3-point game. That's a 4-point game. That's a 5-point game. That's a 6-point game. That's a 7-point game. It's an 8-point game. It's a 9-point game. It's a 10-point game. That is an 11-0 run. It's an 11-point game. It's a 12-point game. It's a 13-point game. It's a 14-point game. It's a 15-point game. It's a 16-point game. It's a 17-point game. It's a 16-point game. It's a 17-point game. It's a 17-point game. It's an 18-point game. It's an 18-point game. It's a 19-point game. It's a 20-point game. It's a 21-point game. It's a 22-point game. It's a 22-point game. It's a 23-point game. It's a 24-point game. It's a 24-point game. It's a 25-point game. It's a 25-point game. It's a 26-point game. It's a 27-point game. It's a 27-point game. It's a 28-point game. It's a 29-point game. It's a 30-point game. It's a 31-point game. It's a 32-point game. It's a 32-point game. It's a 33-point game. It's a 33-point game. It's a 34-point game. It's a 35-point game. It's a 35-point game. It's a 36-point game. It's a 36-point game. It's a 37-point game. It's a 38-point game. It's a 38-point game. It's a 39-point game. It's a 40-point game. It's a 41-point game. It's a 42-point game. It's a 42-point game. It's a 43-point game. It's a 34-point game. It's a 44-point game. It's a 45-point game. It's a 45-point game. It's a 45-point game. It's a 46-point game. It's a 47-point game. It's a 48-point game. It's a 49-point game. It's a 50-point game. It's a 50-point game. It's a 51-point game. It's a 51-point game. It's a 51-point game. It's a 52-point game. It's a 52-point game. It's a 52-point game. It's a 53-point game. It's a 54-point game. It's a 54-point game. It's a 54. It's a 54-point game. It's a 55-point game. It's a 55-point game. It's a 56-point game. It's a 57-point game. It's a 57-point game. It's a 58-point game. That's a 59-point game. It's a 60-point game. It's a 60-point game. It's a 60-point game. It's a 61-point game. It's a 61-point game. It's a 62-point game. It's a 63-point game. It's a 64-point game. It's a 65-point game. It's a 65-point game. It's a 66-point game. It's a 67-point game. It's a 68-point game. It's a 79. It's a 69-point game. It's a 70-point game. It's a 70-point game. It's a 71-point game. It's a 72-point game. It's a 73-point game. It's a 73-point game. It's a 74-point game. It's a 74-point game. It's a 75-point game. It's a 76-point game. It's a 77-point game. It's a 78-point game. It's a 79-point game. It's an 80-point game. It's an 80-point game. It's an 80-point game. It's an 81-point game. It's an 81-point game. It's an 82-point game. It's an 82-point game. It's an 83-point game. It's an 83-point game. It's an 84-point game. It's an 85-point game. It's an 84-point game. It's an 85-point game. It's an 86-point game. It's an 86-point game. It's an 86-point game. It's an 87-point game. It's an 87-point game. It's an 88-point game. It's an 89-point game. It's a 90-point game. It's a 90-point game.